Okay. I have hit record. I have hit record. Welcome to the Dialogue Doctor podcast. I have Laura here with me. We just did another mini conference, so we're doing an after party today. But before we get to that, let's do all the things. So the first thing is, if you haven't already, go to dialoguedoctor.com, sign up for our weekly newsletter. It comes out on Tuesday. And this week, you're really going to want to sign up for it because there's a lot of links in it. So
you do it, sign up.
Sign up. You want to sign up for the newsletter. Should also go to the Patreon, patreon.com/Jeff Elkins, or you can find it on the dialoguedoctor.com page, because on Wednesday, a bonus episode comes out. And again, this week on the bonus episode, you want to do it because I'm going to show you how to do some stuff that you're going to like that we're going to talk about later. So $3 a month gets you that bonus episode. You also get articles I write every once in a while. And you get some fiction I read every once in a while. So it's all great. It's all worth it. So, and then if you sign up for the bonus episode on patreon.com for $3 a month, you get to be part of the Slack group. In the Slack group, we do writing prompts together on Tuesday and editing prompts together on Thursday. That is the full Dialogue Doctor experience.
And we're not slackers in that Slack channel. Sorry, you were saying Slack channel, and all I could think was, why do they call it Slack? Nobody Slack. And then I just had to share it. Once I have a pun, I can't control myself.
Yeah. Leave a comment on Laura's pun, how you liked it. Let Laura know how you feel about her puns.
Tell me about my pun.
Tell Laura about her puns. This is the other thing I was told I was supposed to do that I never do because I never think about it.
Making
if
puns?
You listen to us on like iTunes or Google or something like that, go leave a review. Just like go leave a review for us.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Something.
Yeah.
Leave a comment below.
Leave a comment below. Oh, yeah. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment below. If you're listening on a podcast, don't try to leave a comment below. Your podcast things don't have comments below.
Where do you leave comments in podcasts?
On the website. You can go to dialoguedoctor.com and you can look up the episode. And I have all the episodes on dialoguedoctor.com. If you want to watch our old episodes, you just go there and look them up. They're all there.
There are some really good ones there. Listen to the 1-year anniversary one to hear all Jeff's favorites. I guess my favorites are listed too. But
you did your favorites too there. So that's the Dialogue Doctor experience. Go sign up for all of those things. We'll stop pumping that. And let's chat. So thank you to everyone who emailed me. And I did not post an episode last week. Mostly because I was flying home from dropping my son off at college, and Southwest canceled our flight. So I got home 3.5 hours later than I thought I would. And I had a episode in the can to put up, but I was going to have to record the bumper and the intro and all that. And I was really angry because I wasn't angry. I was just grumpy. And so I let my grumpiness get a hold of me. And I was like, no episode this week. And so, I just took a week off. So thank you for everyone who emailed me who was concerned that I had like misposted it or hadn't posted it. For people that reached out to me, it was like, you're really hurting my addiction to the Dialogue Doctor here. It actually felt really good to know that you're addicted. But yeah, thanks for reaching out. I just didn't post an episode because I dropped my kid at college, and that was emotional and heavy.
But he did just call.
He call. We actually delayed this recording a half hour because he called me to talk about things. And he texts with my wife like 3 or 4 times a day, which is really nice that he like still feels that connection, and at the same time is having a very healthy social life at college and a very healthy study life. I'm going to tell a story. We dropped him off. We spent all day moving him into his dorm. This is my first kid going to college. I know for those of you who have like 4 kids that are in college, you're like, get over it. Yeah, I know. I'll be there in like 6 years. I'll have 4 kids in college, and I'll be like, somebody will be like, dropping the first kid off is so hard. I'll be like, I don't care. So we dropped him off. We spent the whole day moving him in, and because he's out of state and we had to fly to where he is, we couldn't bring things. So we had to like go to Walmart and Lowe's and like look for bookcases and stuff like that to actually like, put furniture in his dorm room. And so we're doing all that and we're moving him in. And we get done at like 8 o'clock, putting all this stuff together and getting all the stuff in after we had dinner. And like we say goodbye. And, Wendy and I get in the car and it's like super heavy and we're both crying. And we drive to the Airbnb and we're still kind of like a little teary, and we like sit down on the couch and I make microwave popcorn and we just like start watching some stupid movie on Netflix that I barely even remember. And because I'm just like mindlessly sitting there, like, I just said goodbye to my kid and I won't see him till Thanksgiving. And we watched the movie and then we just let another one roll on. Thank you, Netflix, for just like rolling on to the next thing. And we were sitting there when he was like, you want to watch another one? I was like, yeah, I don't care. I can't go to sleep yet. So we'll just sit here. And he texted us at like 12:30 and he was like, thanks for dropping me off. Miss you guys. Played 3 hours of ultimate frisbee with a bunch of friends. Now I'm at Whataburger having French fries. Love you. Oh, and the last thing he said was, college is awesome.
Aww.
I was like, yeah, he's gonna be fine. And so, and he's doing fine. We keep getting little notes like that from him of like, went to bio lab, and then after bio lab played racquetball for the first time. Racquetball's amazing. Like, it's like, all right, yeah, college student. Anyway, so that's my long story for why there's no episode last week. And thank you to everybody who reached out. I do appreciate emails. They're great. Yeah, so that's all of that. Let's talk about what we're talking about this week. So we just did another mini conference on
great
on building your cast. It was super fun, and the group was amazing. I thought they were really, really engaged and fantastic.
Lots of great questions.
Yeah, and I gotta say, this was our second one, and you added new things to your teaching that I don't even know if you knew you were doing, but you were putting new things to your teachers. Like, oh, I've never thought about that before. So I wanted to talk about it today because I thought it was fun.
Yeah, because the last time was the first time we had done it, and while we were prepared and we studied up, as we were talking, I was taking notes about things we missed. So I adjusted.
Yeah, it was nice. You landed some stuff that was really great. And I'm laughing. I'm laughing because we'll just reveal this to everybody who's listening or watching. In our relationship, when it comes to mini conferences, you are the like organized planner, meticulous thinker, researcher, and I am the like agent of chaos who's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna do things off the cuff. And I honestly, that's not typical for me. Usually I'm pretty anal about things, but I think it was not that you're anal. Usually I'm pretty anal, but I think it's because after 15 years of working as a preacher and like always having to like give some kind of lesson each week, you just gotta get like raw to it where you're like, yeah, I know the material. I'll figure out what to say. Yeah.
It's a really funny dynamic for us because it is so opposite of our typical personalities. Typically I'm like, it'll be fine, we'll just make it up.
Yeah, usually you're the last minute one. You're like once the thing occurs, you're like fully on 100%. But before the thing occurs, I'm like, Laura.
As long as I have 4 hours to prepare beforehand, I'll be fine.
But with the mini conference, I'm like, my favorite moment was when you were like, hey, you're going to use examples. When you use those examples from the Beloved in the beginning, make sure you say this thing. And I was like, examples from Beloved? What is she talking about?
Yeah, because all my examples had to match with your examples.
Because I go first.
And I knew you weren't going to remember.
Oh, I totally didn't remember at all. I was coming in with examples from like Freaky Deaky and like a recent TV show I watched. Yeah, anyway, that's just a little fun insight into the mini conference.
But for those of you who haven't done the conference with us yet, we go really in depth into the dialogue daisy and the 4 components of voice.
Yeah.
And it's like, it really is sort of our 101 course on, how to create a character's voice, and then how to tie that character to other characters.
Yeah.
So it's really, it's a cool thing for me, not being a writer, being an editor, to listen to the way you and the other writers talk about like thinking about creating a story, because I'm get to be part of that with some of our writing clients, like as they're working through. But even at that stage, when I get to work with them, they've already got their story planned out in their head. I'm just helping them rearrange chapters to make sure that the character's emotional connection, the readers can connect to the characters emotionally. So it's really neat for me to hear you all as writers talk about kind of what you think about, and then I can share my perspective as a reader.
Yeah. It's I love hearing when we do these things. I love hearing how the other writers in the group are processing stuff and thinking about what we're doing. We got the Q&A on this one was really great. They ask a lot of really good questions. So that was really nice.
That the first group didn't ask good questions, but I think because
first group, I'm just kidding.
Group, like, I think we blew their minds because it was in early June.
Early June.
It was like the first weekend in June that we did it. And we were just sort of getting to a place. I mean, I remember like the week before that, pulling together the slide about what the components of character voice were. So like we had been talking about them in the Slack channel and on the podcast, but we hadn't really like formalized them yet. So now this group at least had some exposure to them before we talked about them.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, the 4 components of character voice are the words the character uses, which includes the language the character uses and the topics the character chooses to talk about. The character's body language, the character's cadence, which is the sentence structure and paragraph structure that the character speaks from, and then the character's pacing, which has to do with how the character interacts with other characters in the conversation. So does the character speak first? Does the character need to speak last? Does the character hold back? Does the character interject? All that kind of stuff. So sorry, we had said the 4 components a lot, and like instead of being like, go listen to episode blah 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 to learn the 4 components, I thought like, we'll just reference them now. And I okay, so let's do this. I've got 3 questions, and you have to answer for me and I'll answer for you.
Okay.
Because it's weird for me to talk about the things that I said.
Okay, so I'm talking about the things you said.
And I'm going to talk about the things that you said. Because if I'm like answering for myself and I'm like, what's the most interesting thing that's said during the conference? I'm going to be like, I didn't say anything interesting. So this will be better. So question number 1.
Okay.
What was the most interesting thing said during the conference? And I'll go first because I planned these questions.
I just literally heard it.
Like I'll go first. So you were talking about body language, and you made a distinction between the actions a character does and the body language a character has. And you pointed out that characters there can be action happening in a scene that is just description, and then but that is not body language, because body language is, you said, the communication of the character's emotion, feelings, or thoughts through physical action. And I thought that was great. And then you use the example of a waiter delivering plates to a table is not body language. A waiter sliding plates onto a table or slamming plates down onto a table is body language.
I think the example that I use, just to separate it a little bit more, is when the waiter drops a tray accidentally. The dropping of the tray is action.
Yeah.
But when they put their hands to their mouth to say, oh no, oh no, oh no, I'm so sorry, the hands to the mouth is a communication. So it's body language.
Yeah.
The action of dropping the tray.
Yeah. And I really hadn't thought about the difference between action and body language. So that as your co-teacher, unfairly had me spinning for like 30 minutes while you were talking about other stuff, and I was managing your slides, so I don't know if you noticed I kind of dropped out of the slides at that point because I was like thinking about all the implications of action versus body language, and the ways that I'm like thinking about that, my like utilizing moments of, like recognizing when I write moments of action and trying to decide whether they're dialogue or not, like whether to use those as body language, and then like thinking about like what characters get body language and what characters just get action, and when is a side character actually worthy of body language versus a side character being worthy of action, and when am I wasting body language on a side character versus when, like, so that's what I was thinking about. I went down a rabbit hole. I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder how often I give side characters body language that they don't need because they're not actually voices in the story, but I'm just like wasting words on these characters and pulling attention away from the protagonist. And but then how often should I give side characters body language? Yeah, that's where my head went when we were talking about it.
As a reader, body language is an element of communication. Mm-hmm. We have, when we're talking to someone, I am going to confess that I am like 90 years old, which we've all confessed in our
on the inside.
When right. Karen starts their podcast after our anniversary episode.
Yeah, I'm 80 on the inside. That's what the podcast is going to be called. I'm 80 on the inside.
Well, now that I am starting to get closer to 80 on the outside, in loud spaces, I have a really hard time hearing people. So I find that I don't so much listen in a loud space as I do watch. Like I'm doing a lot of lip reading. I'm watching a lot of body language to figure out what communication is, because most of the time in a loud, crowded place, I can't hear.
Yeah.
So sad. I'm so old. I feel like I need to get one of those old horn things that you put to your ear.
Did you put to your ear? Hey, what?
Speak to me here.
Speak to me.
Right, like, so I'm so old. Anyway, so for me, it's like understanding that like those nuances of physical behavior that are so much a part of our communication, right? Like when we get angry or nervous and we lean back in our chair and we cross our arms. Yeah. That is so much of communication that when we leave it out of our dialogue, we're missing an element.
Yeah.
And I really have to give you props for identifying that you wanted body language to be part of one of the components. Because in the first dialogue doctor conference, I only used words, cadence, and pacing. I had taken out body language completely because I always thought of it as action. Like, I don't need this. But when you brought it up about needing it, because we don't want to shortchange the readers, I was like, okay, but that's where I was able to come up with the line between communication versus action.
Nice. Yeah. I really like that. That was a surprise to me. It was really nice.
Oh, well, good.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. All right. Well, something you found interesting.
Okay. So.
Nothing. Jeff said nothing interesting.
Nope,
Next question.
Stop. Nope.
Okay.
So the place where you had me reeling in the first one is in the end part when we started talking about allies and antagonists, and that an ally is going to help the character become their best self, and an antagonist is going to make them be their worst self. For those of you who were in the first class and saw my slide after that, Jeff had me reeling, so I really have no idea what I told you in that session. So if you want to reach out to us, I'll give you the new slide.
So funny.
The recording of what I said, so you can actually have that the revised preview, because now that I actually know and thinking about allies versus antagonists in that way, my language was much more articulate. So yeah, that's the thing that I think the thing that was newest for me going into that conference, because again, like you said before, the planning that I did prior to the conference was different than the planning you did. So I had kind of planned my slide there before I had heard what you were going to say. Mm-hmm. So, but everything prior to that was stuff that we had talked about in depth a lot, like the daisy and voices and modulation and all those things that we talk about on a regular basis. Not that those aren't interesting or exciting, but the newest piece to me was thinking about allies and antagonists differently, which actually, once you kind of start thinking about that and you flip it on its head, reading becomes a really interesting thing, because who's really an ally and who's really an antagonist.
Yeah, and it was something because we had a graphic novelist in the group. If you've never done one of these, if you didn't do the first mini conference or the second mini conference with us, which is, they're pretty small, so it's only like 20 people that can claim that honor. We try to cater what we're saying and how we're talking to the people there, and we ask everybody before they come, what are you working on right now? So that we can, like, we had a romance novel this time, so I tried to bring in examples of different romance stuff, and we had an action writer, so we tried to bring in action stuff, and one of the writers was a graphic novelist. So talking about allies and antagonists, and this is super true, I think, in superhero stuff. When I say ally and antagonist, I don't mean based on the character's mission. So your character has a mission, right? Like your character has an objective they want to accomplish, and they have allies in that objective, and they have antagonists in that objective that are like keeping them from their mission. But when we're talking about character voice, that's not what ally and antagonist means, because somebody can be a bad guy but be an ally to your character's transformation. So, like, I would talk a little bit about Batman and how characters like Bane and the Joker tend, when it comes to Batman's character transformation, tend to be allies to Batman, because they push him toward the potential that he has. Even though they're bad guys in the story, they're allies in character voice and in character transformation and characterization. Whereas, like, sometimes friends can be massive antagonists, because they're actually calling you to be the worst version of yourself. They're calling you back to what you are. Recently, I've heard it's a book, but I'm not sure. I haven't read the book. I just watched this show on Amazon Prime. It's a show about a small town in Texas where they have this like weird dare challenge where you have to fulfill these dangerous dares, and the last one standing wins a full scholarship to college, right? Like, it's a really fascinating premise. And the lead character is this girl who doesn't have any money at all, and her friend is actually a antagonist in the story, because her friend, it encourages her to the status quo rather than recognizing her potential and realizing her potential. So yeah, as a ally or antagonist, it has to do with character transformation, not necessarily the role they play in the story. Just to bring that out a little bit more, so give you a 5-minute glimpse into the mini-con ally and antagonist conversation. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a fun new way of thinking about things, because once you know it, you can't look at characters really differently.
Well, if you're plotting character transformation, it gives you more freedom to put people who are going to aid the character's transformation on either side of the bad guy, good guy divide, right? Like, and that works for like romance too. I think part of it is just this idea that, like, hey, everything is movable. Like, there are no rules. You can do what you want to do. Just be strategic about it. So, if you want the bully down the street to actually be the ally that helps your protagonist become the best version of themselves, great, go for that. That reminds me of like Buford and Phineas and Ferb. Like, he's the bully down the street, but he clearly always helps Phineas and Ferb and Baljeet become the best versions of themselves. So he's technically a bad guy, but is an ally in their character transformation. So yeah, anyway, just fun. Okay, question number 2. Something new you learned? And you can talk about your own. You can talk about your own stuff too. Something new you learned doing this round.
I feel like we just talked about that, didn't we? In the interesting?
No, I have a different answer.
You have a different answer? All right, well, give me your different answer then.
Because this is actually all about my answers. I planned these questions for the answers that I wanted to talk about.
All right, well,
and now I'm making you suffer along with it.
I feel like that's our whole friendship.
Yeah. In my defense, I emailed these to you 15 minutes before we started recording.
I saw them, but I thought we were going to ask them to people who attended. I didn't think.
No, I'm asking them to you.
Yeah, I see that now. Okay. All right, something new we learned. All right, tell me what the new thing you learned.
I have a force of chaos. I really liked going back to the antagonists and allies.
Oh, now wait a minute. You're saying you really liked. That's not answering the question.
No, this is something new I learned.
Okay.
Something new I learned was you talked about how to build the character voices of your antagonists and your allies. And one of the things you said for antagonists is focus on the commonalities with the protagonist first, but for the allies, focus on the differences first. And you've said that before, but it's never actually clicked in my head. And when you said it this time, I was like, oh crap. A, that's really profound. and B, because before you said it, I was like, blah, 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 Laura's talking. I'm just kidding. I never think that.
Again, I feel like it's our whole friendship. You're like, hey, I got this really new idea. Let's do this thing together. And I say, okay, I'll do it with you. And then I start talking and you're like, whatever.
So we're doing the new thing? We're doing the new thing? No, I don't do that. I think your thoughts are profound.
And okay, so to give us both some credit here, this week's Slack channel edit was about antagonist voices. So it was on like the pairing of the two.
Oh my gosh. It was, yeah. And your Slack channel, so this is the editing prompt that comes out on Thursday if you're part of the Slack. Your Slack channel prompt this week was epic because you used a video from Justified as part of the edit, which I was like, damn. Points. I've never pulled off a video in my prompt. I write the writing prompt on Tuesday.
That's not true. You did. You had Winnie the Pooh.
I did have Winnie the Pooh.
You had Winnie the Pooh.
When we were talking about miscommunication.
Listening to the podcast. And for those of you who are watching, I just spilled water all over my shirt. So.
Issues or issues? Bless you, bless you. No, not at you. Issues. Yeah, sorry.
I think this also shows a difference in the type of television we watch. You put a video clip of Winnie the Pooh, and I put a video clip of Justified.
Winnie the Pooh. Yeah, it's best Winnie the Pooh movie ever. And there is a fantastic scene where Owl is explaining to Winnie the Pooh and Eeyore something. I don't even remember what. And they're trying
to find somebody.
They're always trying to find Christopher Robin. And when that's the whole plot of Winnie the Pooh, they're always looking for Christopher Robin. And when that damn kid keeps leaving, and when they poor toys sitting by themselves, but when Owl says issue, they think he's sneezing. So it's this fantastic, really humorous miscommunication. Okay, but I'm just gonna read your editing prompt this week. Can I do that?
I mean, I guess so. But yeah, don't we want people to join Patreons?
No, yeah. You know what? We give it. I'm about to give away like 3 free tools in a second. So, you know.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, we just give everything away. Okay, so this was the editing prompt for this week. And I was so impressed. So I'm just going to read that first. No, the reading prompt's crap.
I'm sorry, but you have to say the writing prompt or the reading prompt.
All right, fine. So the writing prompt was this week, read a scene in which your protagonist comes face to face with the opposition in your story. If you're going to continue with the romance theme from last week, this should be your love interest encountering the person or persons who will stand in the way of them coming together. If you're writing a crime thriller, this should be a detective, power killer, blah, 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 blah. With these, I go on to multiple examples. We don't need to read those. With these scenes, it's easy to rely on description and inner thoughts. This will be far less engaging than a dialogue-driven moment. Try to write this moment with a dialogue-only first draft. That was the writing prompt on Tuesday. So then here comes your masterful editing prompt. Depending on your storyline, your protagonist can face opposition indirectly by experiencing the aftermath of the antagonist's actions. Example, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra. Or directly coming face to face with their antagonist, Ryan Givens and Boyd Crowder in Justified. When we write
but sorry, I got to stop you right there. So, because for those of you who are hearing it for the first time, like there are two different things there. Yeah. That was like kind of a bonus in the editing prompt, because you have to think about what the opposition that they're facing are. If they're coming face to face with one another, like Boyd and Raylan do in Justified, that's a direct opposition. But lots of times it happens all the time in superhero movies. It happens all the time in detective novels. The bad group does something, and then the good group is cleaning up the aftermath. That's what the indirect is.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Sorry, I just want to make sure that we all heard that.
That's a great addition.
Because,
yeah.
It's hard to hear parentheticals when somebody's reading out loud.
It is totally hard to hear parentheticals. Note for if you're creating audiobooks. All right. When we write, it's also hard to hear italics. Don't use italics. When we write indirect scenes. Okay, wait, I'm going back to it. When we write an indirect scene, we typically pair the protagonist with an ally, so they tend to modulate more open. We've talked about that kind of modulation before, so today let's focus on direct conflict scenes and pairing the protagonist and antagonist voices. A lot of times, the best antagonist-protagonist voices are characters who have similar voices and backstories, but their choices or circumstances put them in opposition. That means we most want the voices to mirror traits of one another. These similarities allow the differences in action to stand out more starkly. It also keeps us on the edge of our seats, waiting for the good to become bad and the bad to become good. Let's take Raylan Boyd as an example. Both are very articulate, witty, self-assured, demanding men who will take no crap from anyone. Both take their time when they speak, knowing no one will cut them off. For the most part, other than what they're talking about, they could practically switch lines and the audience would buy it. At the same time, Boyd, the antagonist, tends to pontificate and preach and speak more poetically than Raylan, making the voices distinct but well matched. Read your story. Now read it.
So, sorry, we got to stop there again. I'm just going to keep stopping you.
You should let it speak for itself. It's excellent. Okay, go ahead.
But like to highlight those things, right? Like we all like a fair fight. So you can't have your protagonist talking to someone who isn't as smart or as strong as they are, right? Like there are amazing scenes where Raylan is talking to Dickie Boyle or to what's his name, the guy with the alligator necklace, Dewey Crow, right? Like they're weak characters, and while it makes really funny repertoire, it's not the same challenge as when Boyd and Raylan go head to head. So the mirroring of those characteristics is super engaging for us. That's where this element of allowing their voices to mirror one another comes in.
100%.
All right, last paragraph. This last part. So the way that I set the editing prompts up, I'm sure everyone who's read them has already figured this out, but for those who are listening for the first time and have never experienced them, they're set up typically in 3 parts. Not always, but typically. The first part kind of summarizes and like orients us to what we're going to be writing about. The middle part helps us understand the changes we're about to make. And then the last part is the actual action items you can use to edit your piece.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to drink this water without spilling it all down the front of me while you read the last paragraph.
She's got a drinking problem. All right. Read your story. Now read it again, but this time switch dialogue tags. Everything you wrote for the protagonist, read as the antagonist and vice versa. Anything that works voice-wise, not necessarily details, but how it's said, highlight in green. Anything that doesn't, example, one starts to justify their actions when the other would not, highlight in red. You want about 70% green and 30% red. If you have too much green, your readers may have trouble distinguishing who's speaking. Focus your edits on making voices in a distinct Focus. Crap.
All right,
Focus your
I'll just read this
edits
part.
on making the voices distinct in a few key areas of the scene. If you have too much red, your readers may have trouble understanding why these characters are even in a rivalry. Focus your edits on the common elements of their voices. So I thought that was brilliant. I love color coding my stuff when you
I know
do
I
edits.
learned that from you. I never color coded until you showed me you color code.
Oh yeah, color code everything in my edits. Color. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, it's so easy when you're typing. Like, why not? You got that color code button there. Just color code to see voices, take it all out. Color code to see types of phrases, take it all out. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, I thought that was really. I felt like I was learning that in a new way this week, where it's like, oh, antagonist voices need to line up, and when they line up, the conversation between the antagonist and the protagonist becomes super engaging, which is really nice. Yeah. Anyway, that was mine.
I'm glad when I write these, I'm always like, everyone's gonna think these are garbage. Just why are you even doing this?
Awesome.
I love the feedback. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Question 3. Are we ready for question 3?
I mean, sure, I didn't answer question 2, but
did you learn anything new? I just said all the same old stuff. I didn't say anything
learn something new every time. Trying to remember what I learned that was
yeah. Question 3. All right.
I have something. I just don't know what it is yet. So we'll do question 3 and then I'll come back to it.
You have nothing. All right.
I took notes. I learned something new. All right, hold on. I'm gonna look at my notes. I should have done it.
No, I'm asking question 3.
All right, ask question 3.
Stay focused. Something we wish we'd spent more time on.
Oh, all of it.
You can't say all of it. That's not a good answer.
Okay, so
that's as much that all of it is as equal as saying none of it.
All right, so
those are the same.
All right, so we keep the question and answer portion pretty brief because we do it like after each lesson, and because
we keep saying this thing's 4 hours and it keeps taking 4.5 hours to finish.
Well, there's that, but then there's also like the follow-up where we get to meet with each person individually, or those who sign up. You don't have to sign up for the after party. It's not an after party. I say that.
It's a session where we look through their character cast,
right, which you can get even if you're not attending the conference. It's a thing on the website. So head over to the website. It's a service.
Look at you mentioning things on the website. You're so good at this. Anyway,
I mean, you've mentioned the website like 4 times. So
well, I have to. It's the intro to the podcast.
Okay. Whatever. Stop interrupting. Just let me talk. So sorry, we spend a lot of time together. Clearly. Well, a lot of time together on Zoom.
Friends for years, friends for tears.
Okay, so now I totally forgot what so then we have these after sessions where an author brings their story to the table, and Jeff guides character background and personality, and I guide voice development to give the author tips on, okay, if you're struggling with how this voice should actually tie to personality, highlight these elements in cadence or pacing or body language or words, right? Like just think about it this way. So we spend 90 minutes doing that so that at the end, the writer has a really strong protagonist, antagonist, and side characters, right? Not all the side characters, obviously, because oftentimes in a book we have a lot, but the ones we're going to see in the most scenes. So when we're giving examples in the course, we're giving examples from fiction that's been in publication for years, and sometimes years and years and years and years. And we do that because we want everybody to have something that they can hold on to as examples, right? We try to use a lot of examples. Jeff talked about us using Beloved. We use To Kill a Mockingbird. We use the Lord of the Rings books by Tolkien. This time we included a little bit of Freaky Deaky because it's what we're reading for our book club, right? So like we're always talking about that, but what we don't have time to show very much is like, here's a story we've created or we are creating. Let's show you how to really go through that process, because we're waiting for the writers to bring that. So the one thing that I think would be a really nice addendum to this, or like a mini course to pair with it, could be like, do you want to see this in action? We'll create a story together as a group, or we'll create a character background together as a group and create a voice from it, or start with some voice characteristics and work backward into personality and then into character background. So that's the place where I feel like I'd really like to see us spend more time if we were going to make the course 5 hours instead of 4 pushing.
Yeah. I like that. I'm actually, I was going to consider telling you like, hey, the next time it needs to be 5 hours, because there's things that I'm holding back on that like I don't want to hold back on anymore. And then there's things that I think I talk too much about. I feel like I do too much on background and personality. But
I actually don't think that you do, because I think the way you break down background and personality is actually really smart, because I don't know, like everybody as writers, we talk about the events that happen in somebody's background, but the way that you pair background and characteristic and personality together, I think is really important.
Okay.
So, but we're not going to tell any more about that, because we have to leave something for people to.
I'm going to say that the main point of that is that we talk about in the conference is that background, your character's background and personality is a conversation with the culture that they're in.
Yes.
And so that's the main, and I do like talking about the culture, but the place that I wish that we spent more time is the practical, like once you filled out your chart, how to write with it. Because we do that at the end of like, hey, here's one way to use your chart in a practical way. But the truth is like, which is the character wheel. So like building the character wheel. If you've been listening to conversation for the podcast for a long time, you've heard me talk about the character wheel, where you take like what's on your character chart and then you like put it in a visual so that you can actually practically use it when you're writing. I don't actually use those anymore, because we started talking about the character wheel a year ago. And as I've been thinking about, like, as I've been writing and like figuring out, like really focusing on the tools I use, I've kind of moved out of a character wheel, and I use, because I'm finding that I don't need all the modulations in front of me all the time. So I end up creating a scene sheet where I'm like, these are the modulations I need for this character. So I go to the chart and I create a scene sheet where it's like, okay, these are the voices I need for this scene.
Yeah. And the more that we talk about this, the more that I think that, we say all the time, this isn't a formula. This is a toolbox. We're giving you a toolbox. And I think depending on where people are in their writing journey, like the reason that we started with the character wheel chart and the reason that we used it for so long is because that's where, if you're starting, that's the place that you should start.
Yeah.
Because it lets you look at the modulations and it lets you compare them and it lets you see in one sheet the arc of a character in comparison to the arc of other characters.
Yeah, and I think it's still critically important. Like I still make a character voice sheet for all of my, like for every book I write. But it's not as it's really helpful at the first or at the beginning of an edit. But because I'm one of these writers that doesn't write full time, so I don't have time. Like I'm writing a Vela with a friend right now, JP, and he wrote me this week. He's like, hey, I'm going to make a storybook, which is like a book of all the details and everything we've decided. And I wrote him back. I was like, I will never read it. So because I have like 45 minutes to an hour at night to write. That's all I have. And if I have to spend 15 of those 45 minutes reading something, it's going to drive me crazy. So I really just need something I can glance at. And typically what I've gotten into the habit of doing is creating the thing I'm going to glance at when I wake up at 5:30 in the morning, taking like 5 minutes to be like, okay, tonight I'm going to write this scene. So I create my thing in the morning, I let it stew all day. And then when I sit down to write at night, I have it ready and I don't even need to look at it because it's in my head because I've been thinking about it all day. But yeah, it's all about efficiency of time for me. So the character chart is super important because it forces you to like compare and contrast your character voices to make sure you don't have monomouth and to make sure that your voices are going to complement each other well and have good contrast from each other. But if you're limited in time in writing like I am, using that chart right before you write can just suck time because you look at it and you just get lost in it. So I've been trying to create different, and the character wheel does the same thing. When I have like a display of the full chart, because that's what the character wheel is a display of the full chart. When I have a display of the full chart, I get lost in it and I lose time. So I've been making this thing that I've been playing with called a scene, what I'm calling a scene sheet, that helps me like plan the modulations I need for the scene and then just writing from the scene sheet because it narrows it down to just what I need. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, that's so I wish we need to spend more time on that in the future and give multiple tools, because the truth is sometimes I don't even need a scene sheet. I use, and this, I know this sounds so like woo-woo weird, but I use physicality, like my own physicality, to get into voice. I take on a body position that reminds me of a character, and then I try to internally feel the emotion that I'm about to write. And if I'm in the body position and feel the emotion, I can lock in the voice. And I know that sounds like, Eastern mystical,
It's funny that you say that because we say that
yoga
at
for
work
writing
a lot too. So
yeah.
I guess my question for you is, did you start doing that with your fiction and bring it to our day job, or did you start it at our day job?
I started doing it with our fiction and brought it to our day job.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. I started doing it with my fiction. Mostly I started doing it when I was writing a kid. When I was writing Jose, it was really difficult. So I would physically make myself very small. And that helped me get into voice.
That's interesting.
But yeah. Yeah. And I think part of that is for me, this is way more than anybody wants to know, but since we're talking about it, I have very broad shoulders and I am a big person. I take up a lot of space in the world, and it has always made me incredibly self-conscious. From high school on, I've been incredibly self-conscious about the amount of space I take up in the world. Because I'm an introvert, because I don't like to be seen, I really just want to disappear. But because of the physicality that I partially have something to do with, because I eat a lot of Oreos, and partially don't have anything to do with because the big shoulders are genetic, it has always been very painful for me. Like, I just want to disappear in front of people. And so the fact that like people look at me and tend to call me big guy is really haunting. So I'm highly aware of my physicality. So manipulating my physicality to bring about character voice is very easy for me, because I'm very aware of the space that I take up in the world. So yeah, that's why that came about, is like, I'm always very aware of where my body is and like what I'm doing with my hands, and like, where, like right now I'm physically with a Lego, if you're watching on YouTube, and where, like, where I am in relationship to others, all that kind of stuff. Like, that's always on my mind. So using that self-conscious, probably very unhealthy. There's probably psychologists listening to this right now being like, oh, Jeff needs a session. Using that self-consciousness to my benefit when it comes to writing is how I started using that physicality stuff. Yeah. To write, this is a weird one. I had a character in my first real novel, because I wrote a novel and it wasn't a real novel, and then I wrote a real novel. I had a character in my first real novel who's very tall. So I would stand, I've never shared this before, but before I wrote him, I would stand on my tiptoes just to feel taller. Be like, oh, now I'm making. Yeah, anyway, weird tricks we do to get voices in our mouth. The whole goal is to put the voice in your mouth. Okay, anything else about the conference you want to talk about before we talk about new tools?
I learned something new during the conference. I did. I told you I did. But
you learned that Jeff will never bring the same illustrations twice. Because he's coming up with his illustrations as he talks.
Well, I mean, I knew that about you already, but no, character wound.
Yeah.
We talked about how character wound is part of background, and wound is never something that I've really given much thought to from, like, I don't know, where it fits in the design. And we really talked about it quite a bit as part of background. So.
Yeah, I don't really like the language of character wound. That's not something that, as a writer, that's not something I use to write with. But, I've done over 100 clients this year, and I'd say, at least 40 of them showed up with their character wound. And so it's something I've had to start using. But, part of what we're doing here is I want to build tools for everybody to use that enhances what they're doing, doesn't force them to bend to what we're doing. That's something we say in this mini conference a lot, is that, like, hey, what we're teaching you today, this is about enhancing what you're already doing, not forcing you into a new system. Because who has time to learn a new system? So it's about, like, taking what you're doing and trying to build on it. And so, because I find a lot of writers talk about this idea of, like, this is the wound the character is dealing with. I decided this time to incorporate it into the conversation around background. And just for those who, have heard me talk about the dialogue daisy, character wound is part of the background. It's part of the roots. It is not the personality or the character voice. Because that's where I hear it a lot. I'm like, what is your character's voice? What does your character sound like? And people are like, well, the wound that they have. It's like, no. That's part of your character's background. That's part of your character's history. So, that is, and it leads to the personality, but it is not your character's voice.
It's definitely not voice. I will agree with you there. But if we're nitpicking, and we talk about this a lot in the conference too, what goes where and there is no spoon.
Laura and Jeff's obsession with precision. Yeah.
So I feel like if we're gonna create a system, we should at least use it.
Right. We're gonna get it right, damn it.
The event that causes the hurt is in background, but the wound itself actually falls within personality.
No.
See?
No. No.
So
lies.
Trauma.
Lies.
The event that happens.
Yes.
Happens in background.
Yes.
But that starts shaping someone's personality.
Yes.
And that shaping of the personality is the actual wound itself.
No, because that's not how people talk about the wound.
I mean, that's
when
fine.
People talk about the wound, they're like, this is the thing that happened, and now they can't get over this. Now they can't get in a love relationship because this happened. Well, the fact that they're guarded is their personality, but the guardedness is the expression of the wound, not the wound itself.
So, but that's what I'm talking about.
Because a lot of times the wound goes away, like in real life. Like for myself, the wound, like, ages and becomes a scar and not an open wound anymore.
But the event never leaves, but the personality element of it does heal. And that's why I'm saying that
I think it's the flip. I think it's the flip. I think the wound becomes a scar and starts to like the event starts to disappear even in memory. But the fact that you're guarded, this personality trait, that remains. Because it built out of the wound and it stays in. A lot of times, like, we behave in ways, like, we attribute personality details and we don't even remember why we have those personality details anymore, but they're from a scar that, like,
but not necessarily. So
not necessarily.
No, but this is where I think that the language of wound needs to be broken down into event and the aftermath of, like, putting the word wound on the daisy itself shouldn't be there, but we should take the language that's on the daisy and use it to explain a wound, because the event never goes away. the impact that it has on our personality can fade, like you're describing, but the fact that the event occurred never goes away in our backstory.
Yeah.
Right. So this is where, and
which is why the wound is in the backstory and the personality is an expression of it.
And that's what I'm saying is that it's not.
No, we agree. You agree with me.
I don't agree with you. I don't. You can hear me agreeing with you if you want, but I don't.
Anyway. No, Laura, we're saying the same thing. You're saying what I'm saying.
No.
Trust me. You're saying what I'm saying.
All right. Anyway, so yeah. We've been doing this for like an hour now.
Oh man.
Nobody's still listening. So
nobody's still listening. Nobody's watching anymore. That means I can say whatever I want.
Right.
You think that makes me wrap up, but that actually makes me pontificate more.
For like if people want to come to the next conference?
I don't know. Yes. On the website this week, I'll put up the sign-up sheet. If you have interest in coming to the mini conference again, you can come and sign up. We've decided we're gonna hold it twice a year. So we'll do it again sometime around May, probably May or June. And we've talked about adding another conference too, because something we don't get to, this conference is very heavy on the like prep for writing, prep for editing, but we don't actually get into the like how to write dialogue, how to edit dialogue. We talk a lot about like prepping your cast, prepping your voices, prepping yourself, right? Like to do these things. So we're thinking about starting a second mini conference, probably the first one will roll out in February, in which we get real nitty gritty and like, hey, let's talk about writing and editing dialogue and just get real intense into writing and editing dialogue. So yeah, that's probably coming in February. Did I describe that well enough?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah. Anything you want to add about that?
No.
Okay.
But if you're interested in it, leave a comment below or go to the website and comment. Tell us what you want. Or if you're in Slack, write about it in Slack. Tell us what you want.
Yeah.
So we can really, because again, the whole purpose of this is not for us to just talk about what we want to talk about. That's what the podcast is about. The podcast gives Jeff and me time to argue details of what goes in what column, what becomes pacing versus cadence.
And I really appreciate you compromising tonight and just agreeing with what I...
Okay, following this podcast, you are getting the video scene of Sheldon and Leonard describing what compromise actually is. I'm also going to need you to
compromise is when you do what I want you to do. What'd you say?
I'm also going to make you sign a friendship contract.
It's like 17 years in. You're too late. Okay. Let's talk about new tools. So yeah, I'll put the sign up sheet. If I get up off my butt this week and actually do what I'm supposed to do, I'll put the sign up sheet onto the website, and we'll put an interest sheet for the new thing too that we're talking about. I'll put a brief description of it and see if people are interested in that as well. And if we get 10 people, we'll hold it because we actually like them smaller. So because we get to spend more time with individuals. So if we get 10 people that are interested, we'll hold that thing. Okay, can I talk about new tools?
I mean, it's your podcast.
That's right. It is.
Even if I say no, you're going to say, I'm glad you compromised and said yes.
I'm glad you compromised and told yes that I can talk about new tools. You're the best, Laura. You always agree with me. Do exactly what I want you to do on the podcast.
Yes. And all of our listeners I can agree and attest to the fact that I always agree with you.
Oh my gosh. They're applauding your agreement with what's going on. Okay, I'm going to show everybody. If you're on YouTube, you're about to see my screen. If you're not, I'm going to describe what I'm showing. So on the website right now, we have this free tool. It's called the Character Wheel Chart. We're going to keep this on the website. It's free. You can go get it. It's a Google Sheet or an Excel sheet you can download. It helps you compare and contrast your cast. The first column is your character's name. The next column is general details about your character. The next column is your character's personality. And then you have notes on your character voice. And then you have all the emotional states for modulation that you can put on there. Your baseline modulation and all the emotional states for modulation. We talk all the time about filling this out. We filled it out on the podcast before. So if you've never seen it, just go listen to a podcast. You can hear us like fill that out for Lethal Weapon or something like that. So this sheet is great and we're keeping this sheet. But since the last year, that we've been using this with authors and working this with authors, I've been paying attention. And I'm like, oh, there's better ways to do this. There's easier ways to do this. So we're going to put up a version of 2.0. And I'm going to show you 2.0. 2.0 has, what it has on here is 12 characters. It's a Google Sheet with a whole bunch of tabs. And there's a tab for each character. So that, because I find when I fill out the big character wheel sheet, I really struggle because I am a little obsessive compulsive. And as I start to fill it out, it's very difficult for me to focus on like what's going on in the sheet. So I really need to do one character at a time and then put them on the character wheel sheet, but that takes too long. So I'm just like, I look at it, I'm like, just be there, just happen. So what we're doing is we have these tabs and there's a tab for each character. So now the first row, you fill out the character role. Is it, and it's actually a drop down. So you can just drop it down. It's a protagonist, antagonist, protagonist ally, side character. And then you have the name of the character, the physical details of the character. That's all just to keep it so you can remember it. And then we come down into like what on the dialogue daisy are the roots. We have background details, family details, notes in place and culture, notes on personality, moves into the stem, and then notes on personal weakness, problems and weakness. It's really hurting my argument. I know, no, I just put it in the wrong place.
For those of you who are listening at home, wounds is your personality. Thank you for compromising and agreeing with me.
Podcast is over.
I am so glad
I totally put it in the stem. Why did I do that? Oh, I'm a moron. Crap. It's now officially in the stem. Damn it. All right.
However, the event that caused the wound should be in background details.
Laura wins the moment. All right. You're right. I'm wrong. You're smart. I'm dumb. You're attractive.
Does not make you dumb.
I'm not so good looking. All right. Notes on personal wound.
Whoa. That wound just got very large.
I was quoting Matilda. Notes on, again, the movies we watch are very different. Notes on personal wound and problems and weakness and personality. So you have the stem there too in row 8 and 9. And then underneath that, you have, excuse me, I'm going to pause the recording for a minute. There's a massive banging behind me and I don't know. Can you hear that?
No, but my dog is digging in her bed. So maybe I'll just mute and see if that stops it. Okay.
So underneath, as long as you can't hear it, we'll keep going. But there is a huge banging behind me, which is really strange. Yeah, so underneath the stem stuff, you then have this big chart that is 6 columns long, and it goes down to each modulation and lets you fill it in, right? Description of the modulation, words, body language, cadence, pacing. And then you go to the next modulation. You have type of modulation, which is a drop down. And the type of modulation gives you emotional, meaning that like this modulation happens if the character is changing emotion. Circumstance, this modulation happens if the character is changing circumstance. Role, this modulation happens if the character is playing a new role. Or with people, this modulation happens if the character is hanging out with a certain group of people. So then you get like type of modulation, description of modulation, words, body language, cadence, and pacing in this bottom chart. So here's the cool thing that I learned how to do this week. I spent a lot of time on YouTube, y'all, trying to figure out how to run Google Sheets. So you fill this out on the character sheet, on the character voice design sheet for each character. And then we have this tab that I'm going to start calling the character voice chart because I don't use it as a wheel anymore. So I'm going to remove the word wheel from it and just call it a character voice chart. It'll auto-populate, which is sweet. So if you write what the words are in your character design sheet for character 1, it'll auto-populate here in the voice chart so you can compare stuff. And I've got the modulations color coded so you can see them. The only problem with this chart is that it's really big. It goes to column AS, which is just a big chart to deal with. I'm still kind of working on that. I think to get it smaller, we're actually going to have to like build some software
No, you can actually take and put, I can do it for you when you're ready to turn it over. We can put all the, what?
Nothing, I'm just being a jerk. Keep going, sorry.
We can take it for what? Never turning it over to me? Yeah. You realize that wound is always going to be in personality now. You never slow it down. But yeah, we can merge several of these group into one. So like each character only has one block for background and one block. You can merge that content together.
I don't know how to do that.
Well, I will show you.
You're very smart. I didn't get that far.
I watched a lot of YouTube.
I didn't get that far on YouTube.
How to use Google Sheets.
I didn't get that far on YouTube. I got lost in like query, how to use query on Google Sheets, and then I realized like I don't have to do that.
No, it's just an equals.
It took me like 4 hours to realize I don't have to do that.
Oh yeah.
So here's the
other thing you can do is you can color code the worksheet based off of what words are there, which is kind of awesome.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can play with this after we get off the podcast all you want to.
Now that the whole podcast knows that we spend all of our time when we're not on podcast on Google watching YouTube.
Playing on Google Sheets and watching YouTube. That's why I only have 45 minutes to write tonight because I have to set aside 2.5 hours to watch Google Sheet YouTube. It's a thing. There's a big Google Sheet YouTube community. I actually don't think there is. Anyway,
I think there is.
Oh, it was hard to find the videos I needed. But there were a lot of videos, so maybe there is a Google Sheet YouTube. What are we talking about? Stay focused, Jeff. So anyway, so this is going to be on the website.
Tool. It's coming.
It's going to be on the website this week. You can go get it and use it. I just have one request. And I write this on the website. So if you read the instructions, you see it. Do not start filling in. Don't open this and start filling in comments.
Just lock it.
I don't know how to do that. It's for everybody. Go to the file drop down and make a copy
Jeff,
of it. And if you go to file and make a copy, it's all yours. You can have it. You just got to go down to file and make a copy. You don't know how often I go into our character wheel sheet and I'm like, who started filling that out? And I just delete your crap. So don't fill it out in the character sheet. Make a copy and then you have your own copy and you can fill out that copy all you want to. But don't.
As soon as it goes up, we'll change the permissions so nobody can even do that.
Oh man, you're like a Google Sheet ninja. I should have been talking to you all the time.
When people mess with my stuff.
I know. I just delete it. I don't feel bad because it says on the website not to do that. So if you read the instructions, you hear. Okay, so this is the first tool. It's an auto-populating character voice chart. If you've been using our character voice chart, which it's actually the most clicked link on our website, which is funny. If you've been using our character voice chart, this is version 2.0. It'll be up on the website. You can use it. I'm putting something else up on the website too. And this is a collaboration with Jay Thorne and Zach Bohannon's 3-Story Method. So 3-Story Method is an amazing book about plot. Jay and Zach went super, super deep on like all the ways that plot are used, all the way back to like Greek literature. They did this like deep dive into it. And I've read a lot of plot books. I've read The Story Grid. I've read Save the Cat. I've read a ton of plot books. And I've used a ton of different plot things to write my stories. I find Jay and Zach's to be the easiest to use. 3-Story Method, I'm a huge proponent. So I asked them if I could put this in the chart, and Jay said yes, and so it's in the chart. So this helps you plot a scene, and it combines the conversation dialogue Doctor's been having with emotional flow and Jay's 3-Story Method plotting questions. So first row is name the scene, and then you write a 3-sentence or less summary of the scene. Then you write, what does the protagonist want and what does the protagonist need for the scene? Those are incredibly difficult questions to answer sometimes, but really great in honing the scene. When I try to answer those questions, I try to do it in like 5 minutes or less. So this is kind of the prep that I'll do. I mentioned now that if I'm writing a scene in the evening, I try to prep it in the morning. This is part of that prep I do. I just kind of like, okay, what do they want in the scene? What do they need in the scene? What does the antagonist want? What does the antagonist need if there is an antagonist in the scene? Sometimes there's not. Sometimes like a force is the antagonist, so want and need doesn't really apply, but that's a deeper conversation. What's wrong with the protagonist world? So this is like, what's the problem the protagonist is trying to solve? And then you beat out the scene into 3 beats: conflict, choices, that the protagonist makes based on the conflict, and consequences that the protagonist faces based on those consequences. So we put this in here because it's just great plotting questions to think about when you're talking about a scene. Then we get down to the emotional flow questions. And so once you've kind of thought about how your scene is going to work and what's happening in your scene, then I want you to think about how do you want the reader to feel when they read this scene. And I want you to describe it. And it may be that like, okay, I want them to start happy and end nervous, right? Or I want this scene to cause a sense of dread, or I want this scene to be anticipatory. And then I do this weird thing, and there's a reason for it. The next row, I ask you to rate the emotional flow with a number, and it's a drop down. I let you just pick it. It goes 4, 3, 2, 1, -1, -2, -3, -4. If you've watched the podcast a ton, you've seen me chart emotional flow with people on like a Jamboard. And my goal is, if I may not get this working this week, it may take me 2 weeks, but my goal is when these things auto-populate to the big sheet that I'll show in a minute, it actually creates your emotional flow chart for you, so you can kind of see the layout of your story and what your reader's experiencing as they read your story. That's my ultimate dream for this. We'll see if I can actually figure out enough code, or if Laura, the Google Sheets ninja, already knows how to do that. She's like nodding. She's smiling like, yeah, Jeff, you're a moron.
Well, the other thing we're going to do is we're going to put this and the other one together into one tool. So when you type in the character's name and the modulation description, the words, body language, cadence, and pacing auto-populate for you, so you don't have to write them in yourself.
Oh, but that's going to be a lot of tabs.
No, it doesn't matter, because you can rearrange them and hide them. And
because for a full story, you need like 50 of these tabs for like a scene.
Yeah, but you only have to scroll to the scenes, the ones that you need all at once. I mean, is it easier to just type 2 things and have the thing populate, or is it easier to scroll? And I mean, we can talk about this offline. Nobody wants to hear this.
I mean, leave us comments on what we should do. Somebody's going to leave a comment like, hey, I'm a coder and I can just build this for you. So if that's true,
that's the thing.
Leave that comment.
We can do that. We can code that.
Yeah, well, you can code that. I'm going to watch like 10 hours of YouTube to figure out how to make a chart. Okay, and then below the emotional flow, we have your voice modulation cheat sheet, which you'll actually use when you write the scene. So you list the characters that are in the scene, where you want their beginning, at the beginning of the scene, what you want their voice to be, and at the end of the scene, what you want their voice to be. So we're actually plotting like, how are we going to modulate a character's voice in this scene? Not all characters' voices need to modulate in a scene, but if you have a character's voice that's modulated in a scene, this is just a real quick cheat sheet. And then when I write a scene, I just look at this cheat sheet. This is what I've been doing for my scenes lately, and it's helpful. So I'm kind of, I don't give things to y'all unless I test them on myself first, which is super scientifically ethical to test things on yourself. So yeah, I test this on myself first. I mean, we won't riff on that. So anyway, all that to say, this is going to be up there too in beta. Play around with it, check it out, have a good time with it. Leave suggestions for us. Don't just start filling out the sheet. If you start filling out the sheet, I'll be mad. Make a copy and use your own copy, and then send me an email and tell me what you feel about it. But don't just start filling out the sheet, because I will delete your things. I will delete all of your toys. You'll fill out 50 tabs. And then you're going to actually, if you do that, I'll probably try to figure out how to get it to you. But I won't. I'll delete it. Don't do it. Okay. That's all I have to say about that. Yeah. So 2 new tools on the website this week. Lots of fun. Laura's like, I'm so done with you. Lots of fun. Go grab them. They're free. You can just use them.
It's supposed to be a 30-minute podcast. We're now at 90 minutes.
That is the worst. Okay. I'm the best podcaster. I love podcasting. Everything I say is relevant. Okay. Laura agrees with me all the time. All right. So we've talked about the conference. We talked about the mini conference. We talked about the sheets. Did we have something else to talk about today?
We talked about what's coming next.
We talked about what's coming next.
Tell us what you want.
Yeah, tell us what you want. Shoot us an email. Come join the Slack community. Yeah, you can tell us if you're in the Slack community, listening to this right now, you can just open up the Slack and be like, Jeff and Laura, stop wasting so much time on the podcast. Hey, at least we're not talking about like passing Red Bulls between vans on a highway. At least everything today had to do with dialogue, sort of.
No, it didn't.
I said sort of.
I love
sort of is
I
a
love
broad
how you
term
have this.
that covers lots of things.
I love the vision you have of the world. Thank you. Anyone who's still listening, thank you so much for bearing with us. I'd say that you win a prize, except that somebody's going to respond and say, I won, what's the prize? And we're not going to remember saying you win a prize.
There ain't no prize. You get free sheets on the website. That's what you get. Free sheets on the website.
If you've listened this long, you deserve these new sheets.
You deserve these new sheets on the website. All right, I'm going to stop the recording.